questions, like non-Muslims. I'm not a Muslim. I believe in Jesus Christ.
Sure. Okay.
So, but I have heard and learned some things about the Quran.
Okay.
And let maybe ask a question, see what your thoughts are, see what your mindset of it is. In the Quran, when it talks about the Ida, and there's in Surah chapter 65, ayat 4.
Sure.
Sure. For what I understand, it gives 3 categories of women to for the divorce period. You're probably familiar with it. And
yes.
Regardless of going into the details, one of the categories, you probably already know what I'm talking about.
No, I'll tell you why I'm smiling and laughing, because the problem is it's really sad. Really sad that the Christians generally, or people, when they come, that's the only thing they talk about. Like this idea of marriage and age of marriage. Like basically, if you'd be surprised, like I probably have probably 5-6 videos of my channel. By the way, I don't even upload all the conversations on this topic but I already have probably 4 or 5 videos of this idea because of how common it's there. But it's not just you, but literally on every other Muslim channel, you get the same thing. And the reason is, I'm not going to blame you. You seem like a nice guy. I'm not going to necessarily blame you for it. But the problem is, it is common misconception that is pushed by people who hate Islam. So when someone like you, obviously you're not following Islamic material or whatever, so you come across this stuff, that's what you hear all the time. So you're like, okay, let me go and ask about this question. These are all I would say, arguments which none of them talk about the foundation of the religion. None of them are foundational questions. Why? Because it's whatever question you're about to ask is called a moral question. It's a question to do with morality. Now, moral questions are tied. All moral questions, whatever question you're going to come up with to do with morality, it is strictly tied to the fact of your source of morality. Your source of morality is either objective or subjective. Objective comes from God.
I definitely believe in objective morality.
I know. You're a Christian. You're a Christian, so you should believe in objective morality. So I'm saying you have 2 sources of morality. You have objective and subjective morality. So an objective morality for a Muslim would be the revelation that comes from God. An objective morality for a Christian would be the revelation that comes from God. So if now the question will be here. If you want to condemn something else, someone else's morality, then you need to establish first that within your moral framework, that what you're claiming is immoral. Now, I'm going to ask this question, for instance, for you as a Christian. Where does the Bible...
You didn't let me finish my question, though.
But no, I know what your question is. You talked about the Surah Talaq, and you talked about...
Well, then it also... Ibn Kathir also, in the Tafsir, his commentary on that surah, from what I've studied, would agree with that the women that have not yet menstruated are prepubescent, according to Ibn Kathir himself. So would you hold to Ibn Kathir's interpretation?
No,
I guess dump that part of Ibn Kathir?
No, whether it's Tabari, Qurtubi, or Ibn Kathir, or any of these classical exegesis scholars, all of them are not authority for us as Muslims. For us as Muslims, what is authority is the following: the Quran, the text of the Quran itself, the clear text, and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Then after that, we have something called ijma', which is a consensus of Muslim scholars at a specific age upon a specific issue. And after that, you have qiyas, which is like a form of analogous thing. So these are the sources of revelation for us. These are things which someone can bring and say, okay, here is this. Now, scholars in Islamic history, every single scholar you can name, we can take and reject from them. So in Islam, we have 4 schools of thought. You may have heard Shafi'i, Maliki, Hanafi. I don't know if you're familiar with these things. I'm not sure how much you're familiar with Islamic scholarship. But in Islam, we have 4 schools of thought when it comes to jurisprudence. Practically all of the heads of these schools of thought said the same thing. They said, if my statement goes against the Quran or Hadith or Ijma', for instance, then throw it away. Imam Malik said, every person you take from them and reject, every scholar, including himself, except the person in this grave, and he pointed at the grave of Prophet Muhammad. The only one we take everything from when it comes to religion is Prophet Muhammad, because he's a messenger of God and he's speaking revelation. So Ibn Kathir can make mistakes. Tabari can make mistakes. And they did make mistakes in their tafsir. Now, this verse of the Quran,
would you say Ibn Kathir, would you say he made that right there was a mistake based and that's not what the Quran is
Depends on what
saying,
you
because the Quran
understand.
is depends on how you understand. Because I mean, the Quran, I think
It depends. It depends on how. It depends. I don't necessarily need to disagree with Ibn Kathir's interpretation there. The Quran uses, for example, I'll give you an example. The Quran uses the word nisa there in the verse. Okay.
the word. Say it again.
Nisa.
Okay.
Nisa. And nisa refers to women who are adults, who reach adulthood. That's not the Arabic words for young girls in the Arabic language. Allah used fatayat, for example, in other places in the Quran, referring to girls which are younger. Or you have the Arabic word jariya for a girl which is young in her age. But the Quran uses
that word.
a word. The Quran uses a specific word that is used for adult women, which is nisa.
So that word you mentioned. Can I ask you a question?
That word is mentioned in that verse. That word is mentioned in the verse that you quoted the Quran.
Is that word ever used for a young woman in the Quran, or maybe even in the Hadith?
So the word generally is used for women which are older. Can it be used for women which are younger? It's possible, but it's used generally for women which are older. So if someone wants to say, no, they are used, so I'm talking about the apparent of the word, the apparent of the text. So you have a word that if you use it generally, it refers to women which are adult, but it can also be used in certain cases, in certain senses, to women which are younger. But if you look at this case, you can look at that verse, and you can apply the teaching of the verse to do with menstruation, because there are late menstruation for women which have already reached adulthood. It's a fact, scientific reality that women reach adulthood and they don't menstruate yet. It's a scientific reality. So this verse can apply to that. Okay, this verse can apply to that. But I'm saying I don't even need to take that position. I don't see a problem with Ibn Kathir's position on the issue, personally.
You really?
I don't. Yeah, I don't.
You don't see a problem.
Even though I'm telling you, using the Quran. Yeah, even though I'm telling you.
I know. You may not. I'm not saying you interpret it specifically like that yourself, but you yourself wouldn't even see a problem with Ibn Kathir's interpretation that basically someone could have sex.
Because people don't understand.
The Iddah period could end for a prepubescent woman. So you
need to understand. You need to understand Ibn Kathir's position before you talk about Ibn Kathir's position. Because what people are doing is they take everything in a vacuum. They don't take the whole holistic opinion of Ibn Kathir. So you need to collect all Ibn Kathir's ideas about that marriage first. If you're going to conduct that marriage, and what are you able and you're not able to do. So, for example, when these scholars they speak with certain assumptions that exist in Islamic texts. For instance, we have something called the harm principle. It's a harm principle, which is one of the main 5 principles of jurisprudence in Islam. And that principle is to do that you're not able to do, from the hadith of the Prophet. He says, La dara wa la darar. You're not allowed to cause harm to anyone else or yourself. Okay, you don't cause harm to yourself, you don't cause harm to anyone else. So, if any marriage with any woman at any age, if you're going to cause her harm, physical or psychological, and that can be established, then Ibn Kathir and every scholar out there is going to say to you that is haram. So let's first understand this idea. So that's the first thing you need to understand. Secondly, if a girl gets married in a younger age, there is many Islamic teachings about that. First, for instance, is that this marriage can only be conducted by the father. Generally in Islam, we have someone who's called the wali. A wali will be the guardian of the girl. It doesn't necessarily have to be the father. If the father is not there, it can be someone else. But if the girl is young, the scholars say it has to be the father, specifically the father being the guardian.
And
that specific.
And I'm not necessarily talking. What are you talking about?
Yeah, allow me just to finish the answer.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just so you don't stop in the middle for people they don't get confused. So the father is the only one thank you. So the father is the only one who's conducting that marriage. Okay, it's not allowed for anyone else. Of course, the father is going to care about his daughter. Now, someone say maybe there's a bad father. That he's not allowed. Because in Islam, he needs to show. Now, the second condition has to be for the benefit of the girl. That marriage is going to be conducted for a younger girl. You have to tell us the reason. Why you're marrying the girl young? You say, for example, this person, I love his character, I love his manners. I want to make sure that he's secured for my daughter, for instance. Another reason the scholars mention, for example, a father is poor. He's unable to provide for his daughter. He's trying to get his daughter married young because he doesn't have financial means to take care of her, for instance. So he would make that marriage contract with the girl to take care of his daughter to someone who's good. So scholars would mention these exceptional cases and scenarios. None of these are recommendations for Muslims to do. These are commands in this exceptional case and scenario. What would the Islamic ruling be regarding iddah? Let's not go and marry this or do specifically that. So it has to be the father.
Okay.
It has to be for the benefit of the girl. There can be no harm, physical or psychological, on the girl. And then, if these conditions are all applied and valid, and there is no issues, we don't have an issue with it. The father is agreeing, the husband is good. If things are done for the benefit of the girl, there's no harm, and it's a marriage. I don't see any issues. Where is the immorality there?
I think then there would have to be a specific. If you're going to claim, well, based on harm, there has to be a specific ruling of what exactly would be considered harm and what wouldn't be. Like, sure. I'm not saying you yourself. Hold on, I'm not saying you yourself hold to Ibn Kathir's position, but and I'm not even trying to get into like arranged marriages. That's not really my point. Is getting into arranged marriages, or like, hey, you will marry my daughter, and then maybe there's some type of consummation at a later time. My point is specific to Surah chapter 65, the iddah is applied to women who have not yet menstruated, which Ibn Kathir does interpret as women. So if that's the case, that means that logically somebody can have sex with some women because the iddah period would end, and at point at that the iddah period is, correct me if I'm wrong.
Answer you. You cannot have intercourse with a woman outside marriage. You said you're not talking about marriage, but that's the only situation Islamically where you're allowed to do it. This is this disease. I'm going to be honest. This disease that starts with the P word exists only in Western societies, because Western societies allow intercourse prior to marriage. In Islam, you're not allowed to have not only intercourse. You're not allowed to touch a woman. That is not lawful.
But it's like
touch a woman. That is not.
What's your name? What's your name? I don't want to talk past one another though. Yes. I don't want to talk past one another though, because I'm not really talking about the age of arranged marriages. In the specific verse, the iddah, correct me if I'm wrong, the iddah has to do with the period of time of sexual relation. That's what the iddah has to do.
No.
Because the marriage would have already.
Yeah. Yeah, the iddah is the waiting period. The iddah is the waiting period.
Hold on. Hello?
Sorry, do you mind moving just a tiny bit so we can get in behind you?
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead. Hold on. The iddah is the waiting period.
Move in, we can talk. It's okay. You don't worry. Move a little bit. Hopefully your connection doesn't cut off though. But move a little bit for people and then continue the conversation.
I think it's okay.
Sure? Okay.
So the iddah period correct me if I'm wrong, has to do with the waiting period for people that are divorced. So the marriage would have already been taking place.
Yeah. But the iddah itself, what I'm explaining to you, yes. What I'm explaining to you, the iddah itself is the waiting period until the woman is able to engage in marriage again. Also, the iddah for the first divorce would be the period where the husband can take the wife back without like a new marriage contract. Basically, can take her back with telling her I took her back, or by other means the scholars talk about. So I'm explaining what the iddah is. But I already told you, I already explained to you, I don't have an issue with Ibn Kathir's position. I don't have an issue with the Ibn Kathir's position. If that, as Ibn Kathir takes, which is everything I said to you, that the mother, are you still there?
I'm here. I was looking. Wow, I wanted to look.
Right. So I said I don't have a problem. Yeah, that's fine. Sure. That's fine. So I said I don't have a problem with Ibn Kathir's position, as long as Ibn Kathir's position applied in the way Ibn Kathir takes it, which is that only the father gets to conduct this marriage. It's done for a reason that is beneficial to the girl. It's not the general norm. It's done for a specific reason that is beneficial for the girl. There's no harm happening. You said about the harm, identifying the harm. We have the identification of the harm, by the way. And that identification of the harm is through the people who are specialized in the field. So when it comes to psychology, doctors who are specialized in psychology, physically, doctors who are specialized in anything to do with the physical body of a person. So if a doctor is specialized in the field, this is harmful at this time, it's haram for that any relation to take place. If they say it's going to harm the girl psychologically, it's not allowed to take place completely, 100% forbidden. Where do we get that? Allah tells us in the Quran, as the people of knowledge in their specialized fields, if you know. So if we need to know specifically, now of course the father knows his daughter, but for the things which he's not specialized in, you can go to a psychologist, you can go to a person when it comes to the girl. So if we're saying, this is what I'm saying, if a girl now, a marriage is taking place, a marriage, not intercourse before marriage, a marriage is taking place, a holy ceremony, as people refer to it as, in the eyes of God, with the agreement of the father only, who takes care of, who loves his daughter more than you ever love any other human being, and that is done for her benefit. He's showing the evidence as the reason why it is done for the benefit of the girl. There is no harm, physical or psychological. You have to give me the reason why it's wrong. And if this is the case, which is only Islam is allowed with these conditions. So if someone says to me, this exceptional case, all these conditions apply, you have to give me a reason. Why is this wrong? Why is this immoral?
Well, when it comes to physical or psychological, I feel like even psychological, I think there are certain things people could say, okay, this can cause clear psychological harm, but
if it's the case, that's not allowed. I'm saving you the time. I'm telling you, if you can establish it, I'm telling you, if we can establish harm, then we don't disagree with each other. If anybody can establish harm.
Would you say, so let me ask you, because maybe we're talking past each other. Would you say Ibn Kathir is promoting, his view is that a person can then have sexual relations with a woman? You say that's actually not his position.
I just explained to you Ibn Kathir's position. If all the conditions I mentioned to you, this is what the position for Ibn Kathir is.
So you would see it as just like a betrothal,
Yeah, Ibn Kathir doesn't speak in a vacuum. Ibn Kathir is talking in a context where, in an exceptional situation, when I said to you, where a marriage is done young, with the agreement of the father for the benefit of the girl, and there's no psychological. That is Ibn Kathir's position. So Ibn Kathir is now talking in that exceptional case. Here is the ruling for the Iddah period. Ibn Kathir doesn't talk in a vacuum. He's explaining the ruling in this exceptional case. If that marriage takes place, you should do that. Come up with Ibn Kathir's tafsir. There's none of the scholars say this is what you should do. It's recommended to go and marry this or do that. No, none of them say. They explain to you the verse, the Quranic verse, which has an Islamic ruling in the specific case and situation, exceptional case and situation. If marriage were to take place, what would be the Islamic ruling regarding that? That is Ibn Kathir's position. That's why I said to you, I don't have a problem with Ibn Kathir's position. But it's just understanding Ibn Kathir's position and not being emotional and just like, this feels emotional, so I'm going to disagree with it, you know? Now I was asking you a question. By the way, I was asking you a question about the verse. Now we talked about the verse. I'm going to ask you the question about the verse I was going to ask you about, which is, where does the objective morality that you have, which is Christianity, the Bible, where does it identify that it is incorrect to have intercourse with girls that are young, under prepubescent or or where does it give an age of marriage that you're not allowed to marry before or after? Where is that?
It doesn't give a clear age, but it doesn't give a clear number age. But I would say that based on Paul's writings in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, it very well makes clear that that puberty has to happen based on what Paul said. I wouldn't say Paul says it like that, but I would say based on 1 Corinthians 7, puberty has had to take place.
Where does he say that? What does he say? I have read.
He mentions the flower of her age. He mentions the flower of her age, which has a...
Okay. What does the verse exactly say? You know which verse? You know which verse? Because you mentioned a chapter. You didn't mention a verse. What does the verse say? You know the number?
Let me go. It's in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. It's not a long chapter. Let me go to it. If you can still hear me, I'll just go to it.
I have in front of me here.
Okay, I'll
see the exact verse that you're talking about.
So, verse 36.
36, okay. There's a long chapter then. Alright, if anyone is worried that he might not be acting honorably toward the virgin he is engaged to, if his passions are too strong, he feels he ought to marry, he should do as he wants, he's not sinning. They should get married.
What version are you reading?
I'm reading the NIV, International Version. Verse 36. If anyone is worried, he will not be able to act honorably towards the virgin he's engaged to. If his passions are too strong and he feels he's ought to marry, and he should do as he wants, he's not sinning.
That version, the NIV, I'm not even a big fan of. I'd rather the New King James version.
So now we're talking about the corruption of the Bible, huh? Okay, which version are you talking about?
No, stop. Come on, stop, man. Yeah, that's.
No, it's not. I'm reading your book. By the way, I didn't pick the version. I just went on Google and typed 1 Corinthians 7, and the first thing that popped up was Bible Gateway, and it was NIV, so I was just reading it. I'm not choosing
Yeah,
to
yeah, no,
read this because
no,
I
no.
like
I'm not. I'm not. The NIV is popular. It is the popular version, but I don't think it's the most.
No, but where is the which version are saying what you're saying? Which versions we can open up?
The New King James version. That Greek word is hoper akmos, which that has to do with past the bloom, prime of youth, past the flower of her age. So it's making Paul's making so that actual Greek word, when it says if she is past the flower of her youth, obviously the Bible wasn't originally written in English. That chapter is written in Greek. So that Greek word literally talks about passing her youth. When it says if she is past the flower of her youth, that's what that Greek word means, is literally passing youth.
So what this guy just claimed about the Greek is completely and entirely false. The reason I didn't argue with him too much about the Greek is because whatever translation you want to take, it doesn't really give him a strong argument. So I said I'll argue with him either way for the sake of the argument. But before I go to the Greek, I want to say a more important point actually. This verse that we're reading in Corinthians, Paul himself says 10 verses before that the Creator God gave him no commands at all in regards to this issue of virgins and marriage, and that he's just given his opinion. So this entire verse, I could just simply and very easily dismiss it and say this is just Paul's opinion and it's not even from God. Why do we need to accept Paul's opinion in this issue? But for the sake of the argument anyways, I'm more than happy to talk about the Greek, because the Greek is going to completely destroy his argument. So the Greek word used is hyperakmos. This is the Greek word used in this specific verse. Now, what's interesting is that the majority of the Bible translators translate this verse referring to the man, saying that if his passions are strong. So the reason is actually very simple, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. So now you have someone called Bruce Winter. He has an entire 14-page scholarly article on this issue titled Puberty or Passion. So he has an entire scholarly article just talking about specifically this verse and what does this word mean. So what does he state in this article? First, he states that this verse has long created an unease between biblical commentators. So they had an issue for years about the specific verse and specific wording. Why did he have an issue? So he quotes, for example, commentaries by scholars like Robertson and Plummer on the Bible, where they say that past the flower of her age, this translation is very strong for the word perakmos. So it's not fitting. He also quotes, which is very important and interesting, he quotes this first century Thesian doctor that says perakmos actually means that when the woman is no longer menstruating and can no longer bear children. So that past the flower of her youth, that means she's no longer youthful. So that means that Christian woman, if you want to take this interpretation that this is referring to the woman, and you want to take that Greek rendering and understanding in reference to the woman, that would mean that women, according to Paul, can only marry after the age of 40 or 50 because she's past the flower of her youth. She's no longer menstruating. She is no longer able to bear children. He also quotes G.S. Kissmaker saying that perakmos actually can refer to both men and women. So that verb is actually gender neutral. It can refer to both men and women, and that it refers to the passion of the man. And then he cites BAGD, which is a well-known Greek English lexicon as proof. Then Bruce Winter goes to tell us that translators are unsure whether this is referring to the man or the woman. Like we said, this is a gender neutral term and it can refer to the man and the woman. Well, he quotes G.C. Hurd, and G.C. Hurd was unable to determine if this refers to the passion of the man or the flower of the woman. And then he says, this is what G.C. Hurd says, that the immediate context actually favors that the word refers to the man, not the woman. And by the way, of course, in the end, Bruce Winter himself, who wrote this entire article, he concludes in the end that this is in reference to the man, and it has nothing to do with the woman or the age of the woman. So to summarize, the Greek word is gender neutral. Majority of scholars, and when we talk about the context, they will say that it favors the man, not the woman. And if you say that this verse is in reference to the woman, that this would mean that she is no longer menstruating and that she no longer can bear children, which means she's past the age of 40 or 50. So you'll be saying that Paul is telling us that women can only get married after the age of 40 or 50. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to say, yeah, can I answer you? Okay, so there's two things there. First, the first thing I'm going to establish and say is that the NIV is up to date of the earlier manuscripts more than the KJV. The KJV relies on manuscripts that comes later on. So the one that relies on earlier manuscripts and is the NIV, is not the KJV. So if the NIV says something then that would be the more accurate representation of what the earliest manuscripts is actually saying. So if someone else later added flower of, if you allow me, yes, look, you said you'd finish. When then I start speaking, you didn't even let me finish the sentence, you know? So let me just, like I allowed you, allow me also to speak, yeah? So that's the first thing I'm going to say. But I'm going to do with you that what I do with every Christian, right? I'm going to be nice. I'm going to be like, no problem. Let's take your understanding, your interpretation. It says something about the flower of her youth. It doesn't change anything. He's talking about a fact. If someone engages with a woman past the flower of her youth or whatever, which is puberty, no problem. He's stating a fact. If someone engages with a girl after, he doesn't say that it's wrong to do it before. Nothing explicit in the text there. So even if I were to take your interpretation, that doesn't prove that he's saying that it's before you're not able to do it. If I say, if you get married to a girl that is at the age of 40 and you do this, I'm just stating a reality. I'm not saying to you that you should not.
It's like this.
You should not get married to a girl that is before.
My point is like we don't have to.
Go ahead.
We don't have to. It doesn't have to be an exact word, because that's the thing. Like exact word fallacies. So when Paul is talking about marrying a virgin woman, he says if she. I'll read again. If she is past the flower of her youth. So when Paul says that, clearly he's laying down a command. If you want to marry her, she has to be past the flower of her youth. When Paul is talking about marrying a virgin woman, he says if she. I'll read again. If she is past the flower of her youth. So when Paul says that, clearly he's laying down a command. If you want to marry her, she has to be past the flower of her youth. If she, why would he even say that? It's like if I said to you, Muhammad, get married to a woman, if she is past the flower of her youth, Muhammad. If I said that to you, I'm laying down a stipulation.
He's not saying get married to a woman.
I'm just giving an example of when if somebody gives a stipulation. How is that an equivocation?
It's not the same thing. Because you are given an example which doesn't apply to the current situation. The verse doesn't say what you're saying. But I said to you, I don't care. Pick whichever translation you like. Even if I take your convenient translation that you try to say, so it can fit your narrative, which already, like I said, great because it applies. It shows us how the Bible is corrupt. We have some things in some versions and some things in other versions, relying on different manuscripts because they all disagree with each other. So even if I take your version, your understanding, there is nothing there that says that you are not allowed or it is immoral for you to do that specific action. I already told you that you can go, and we have clear examples where it tells you of girls which are little young girls, you're able to have relations with them, and in the Old Testament. So if this is the reality in the Old Testament, and the Old Testament already teaches you to do that, then even if what you're saying is true, then you'll have to explain how it was allowed in the Old Testament, even if which is not true. Anyways, you're saying you haven't showed any verse that says that. And Paul is not an authority. Anyways, it's a different story that we can get to in a different time. But there is nothing that you explicitly showed me. Yeah, there's nothing that you've explicitly showed me from Jesus or from God, literal words of God in the Old Testament or the New Testament, where